Hello, 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 hello. Hey, this is Warren Redlick. Thank you so much for watching. Hello, hello, hello. We're going to talk about first mover advantage for Tesla, for SpaceX Starlink, for Nvidia. Tesla on both Cybercab and Robotaxi, and also Neuralink. We're going to talk about Neuralink as well. So before I dive into that, I just want to mention one of the reasons why I think Elon is really good at this stuff. And um, there's a book that I recommend reading, and I put a link on YouTube. I put a link in the description below, and I'll put it on X. That 0 to 1 is a book by Peter Thiel that talks about how to build your startup so that you basically, it's not a monopoly, but you get like this level of market power. And I think it's not the same exact thing we're going to talk about here, but it's a really good read. I read it a few years ago. I probably should read it again 5 years ago now. And I highly recommend this book. So please check it out in the link below in YouTube description. And if you're watching on X, I'll put it in the post. So with that, let's start with Starlink, because I think Starlink is the most obvious example of the first mover advantage and how it's going to play out. So what's happening right now? What's happening right now is Starlink, SpaceX Starlink, is deploying a fleet of satellites. So I think they're over 9,000. They're going to be at 10,000 soon. They have plans to go to like 15,000 and eventually I think 40,000 or more satellites. No one else has, I don't know if anybody else has 100. Hi 14.4. I don't know if anyone else has even 100 satellites, and SpaceX has ballpark 10,000 already. So Starlink has 10,000 already and heading for much more. By the time anyone else gets to 1,000 satellites, SpaceX is probably going to have 20,000 in their fleet. And that matters because when you want global coverage, the more satellites you have, the better coverage you have. When you have more customers, you need more satellites to serve them. So that is a huge advantage. And I'm going to lead to where this is going. Let's say this. When you build up all the advantages you see here, and I've got a similar list for the 4 or 5 things I'm going to be, the 4 or 5 different companies or business lines I'm going to be talking about. It just becomes really hard for someone else to come in as the second player and compete. And it's a huge, huge problem. But let's just go through Starlink's advantages, and then I'm going to talk about that point about what happens if you want to compete with this. Okay, so technology lead. SpaceX Starlink satellites are the best low Earth orbit, low latency satellites out there for this kind of network. They have laser links that connect themselves to each other. They're basically building their own internet in space. No one else has that. The cost of building satellites, SpaceX is manufacturing them at scale, right? They're manufacturing them like they have economies of scale in manufacturing these satellites in large volume. And they have the next generation coming, the V3s, which are much larger. And when you manufacture at scale, your costs are lower per satellite and per customer served by a lot. Launch cost is an obvious monster, right? SpaceX has the lowest launch cost. And Starship is coming. It's going to lower launch costs even further. Now, SpaceX has been very good about launching competitor satellites, but I'm pretty sure the cost to SpaceX of launching their own satellites is less than what they're charging customers. I don't think they're charging them like 3 times as much as it costs them, but they're still making a profit on it. And that means the other side's costs are higher. And some of them don't really want to launch on their competitor's launch vehicle. So are you going to launch on Blue Origin, which has double, triple, 5x the launch cost or more? It's a really, really big challenge for anybody who's going to compete. Customer base. I think Starlink may be closing on 10 million customers. In the long run, I think the market for these, the broadband connections, leaving out the cell phone connections, I think the market is somewhere around 300 million customers globally. Something like 60 million in the United States alone who don't really have good broadband internet access. So Kuiper only plans 1,600 by this summer and a little over double that when deployed. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see if Kuiper gets to 1,600. I have no idea how many Kuiper has, but 1,600 is trivial by comparison. And are their satellites as functional? I'm responding to a comment in the chat by 14.4. Are their satellites as functional? Do they have the latency advantage? Do they have the laser link advantage? No, they don't. So as SpaceX Starlink builds its customer base, if they get to, let's say, 100 million customers, and then somebody else comes along and is trying to build their customer base, where are they getting their customers from? And then innovation culture. SpaceX has a radical culture towards constant innovation. So We know the V3 satellites are launching on Starship this year, the larger V3 satellites. And we know there's probably a V4 satellite coming, and they just innovate, their technology is better. So the reason why all this matters, okay, is imagine you were thinking about building your own fleet of satellites to compete with Starlink, right? Well, what's your what's your total cost to deploy a network that's even close to the scale you need? I don't know, 20, $50 billion, something like that. Okay, and once you get your fleet up and you're even remotely competitive with Starlink, your costs are higher, your quality is lower. So now you've got to, are you going to get their existing customers to switch? You can't undercut them on price because their cost structure is lower and your quality is worse. So I don't see how you become the second player in this market and succeed. And now, if you understand that and you are thinking about investing in a company that's deploying a fleet to compete with Starlink, you say, well, where's the profit story at the end of this rainbow? Like, I invest $50 billion building out a satellite network, right? When are we going to make profits? You're not. You're going to lose money. And even if you make money, do you make enough to justify the $50 billion investment? Mark says that there's 9,440 operational Starlink satellites right now. So yeah, they're getting very close to 10,000, and then they'll be at 15,000, and then when they start launching V3 satellites in, I don't know, 3-6 months, something like that. Now the satellites that are up are going to be even more capable, like 10x the capability, if not more. So you're just reaching this, and then they're manufacturing their own antennas, the consumer level antennas. They have, multiple versions of that. They manufacture those at scale, so they have an advantage on cost there. It's just a monster advantage. Hello, Brooke. It's just a monster advantage that prevent monopoly problems by launching competitors. Well, that's the whole point. They're not using their market power to stop competitors from competing. They're not pricing below cost to run people out. They're making a profit. So it's really hard for somebody to come along and say you're competing unfairly if you're willing to launch their satellites at reasonable cost, and you're not undercutting them on price by going below cost, right? So I think Elon knows what he's doing there. It's a huge advantage. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so that's Starlink, and this, what we're going to see is that we've got Robotaxi, we've got Nvidia, we've got Neuralink, and we've got Optimus, and you're going to see the same patterns mostly. Nvidia is the biggest challenge. I don't think Nvidia's first mover advantage is quite the same, but let's go into that. Well, we're going to do Robotaxi first, because Robotaxi, I think, is very similar. Tesla's going to have the largest fleet. They can pump out, Model Ys. I don't know if it's 50,000 a week or something like that. If they need to, they can pump out Model Ys like 50,000 a week. They'll be pumping out Cybercab soon. I think they're supposed to start manufacturing in April. So their ability to pump out a really, really large volume of vehicles is huge. And nobody else is even close to being able to scale their Robotaxis or the Waymos or whatever. And nobody else is even close to being able to produce at scale to be able to fill the roads with a fleet. Technology lead, right? Tesla is the one with the end-to-end, photons in, controls out approach to self-driving. And then they have this massive data advantage that they've run several billion miles using Tesla cars, and they'll hit 10 billion miles soon, right? And nobody else has, I don't even know if anybody else has 100 million miles, right? So the number of miles you need to connect your technology stack to solving the March of Nines, everyone's 5 years behind at least. So Tesla has a monster lead on developing this kind of technology. That's going to play into Optimus later, by the way. Cost per mile, because Tesla manufactures its own vehicles, because Cybercab is going to be engineered to be so low cost, probably cost $20,000 or $25,000. It depends on what the chip cost is, because they're going to have two chips in the cars, and Elon has said, I don't know if he means the AI5 or AI6 chip is going to be like $5,000 a piece. So you got $10,000 in chips in the car, and then the rest of the car is $15,000. I'm not sure how the cost breakdown works. When you amortize that over, let's say, 500,000 miles, and you spread the cost, you spread the cost of the vehicle over 500,000 miles, let's say, that ends up being a fairly low cost per mile. Then you have energy efficiency. I'm predicting that Cybercab will be at least 6 miles per kilowatt hour. I think that's 10 kilometers per kilowatt hour. Excuse me for pitching to people outside of that. Everyday Chris got an unfiltered demo of Nvidia's solution in San Francisco. It's quite impressive. Yes, look, Nvidia has great hardware, but they don't have billions of miles of data to deal with the March of Nines, the crazy edge cases and corner cases that come up. They don't have it. Nobody else has it. Only Tesla has that. That's the tech lead. Nvidia has great chips. And then are Nvidia's chips for going in the cars as efficient as the AI5 chip will be or as the AI4 chip is? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I think Nvidia is really good, but you still don't have the data. So your cost per mile, they're going to have efficient tires. They have this efficient cleaning solution. They're going to self-insure. All these things add up to a lower cost per mile that I think Cybercab is going to be able to deliver rides where Tesla's cost of delivering the ride is somewhere around 20 or 25 cents a mile, maybe 30, right? Which means you can sell rides for 50 cents a mile when everybody else can't sell for less than $1 a mile without losing a lot of money. So, okay. So then software advantage. I don't just mean the software advantage of the car itself, but you have the software inside the car that's providing more entertainment for the customer. You have the ability to optimize your network because Tesla has better software engineers, and you're trying to put it another way. Let's suppose you have a Tesla Cybercab. If half the miles are paid, then your cost, let's say if you're 20 cents a mile cost, then you're 40 cents a mile cost per paid mile. But if you're able to optimize your network so 60% of miles are paid, that's a huge advantage. If nobody else has the ability to optimize in the same way, they might be stuck at 50% paid miles and maybe it's 60% and 75%. I don't know. I think probably anybody's going to get better than 50% paid miles. But Tesla's going to have an advantage there, and it's going to lower their cost per mile, per paid mile. Customer base, because Tesla's going to be first at scale, they're going to build up this network of customers who are choosing that. Why has Lyft never caught up to Uber? Right? Because Uber got the customers first. So if Tesla grabs a large share of the customer base early because they're the first one there at scale, this is what I expect to happen. We're not seeing Waymo scaling to the extent needed. We expect that Tesla will scale, I think, in 2027. I think they're going to start scaling in 2026, but they're not going to reach meaningful scale until 2027. But no one else can scale until 2028, 2029, 2030 at the earliest. 2028 at the earliest, and more likely nobody else scales till 2030 or later. And by that point, Tesla has scaled to many millions of cars. They have many millions of customers that have loyalty. You come out with another car, it's not as safe, it's not as efficient, it doesn't get there as quickly, and it costs more. How do you become, how does it make sense now? And you've got to invest $50 billion to get yourself there. Now, China's probably going to dump their money into doing it anyway. The Chinese government may just dump money into investing in this, but you're just not going to get a return on investment doing this. And in the end, Tesla will still be better than you at lower cost. Maybe in China, the Chinese companies will just lose money hand over fist for years on end, and the Chinese government will subsidize them. But that's China, and Tesla will still compete and still succeed because customers will prefer it. Just like people don't realize this. If you go to Hong Kong, Tesla's outnumber BYDs like crazy. You almost don't see BYDs, right? Asians know Teslas are better than the Chinese EVs. Curious if Tesla will build solar farms for themselves to use the power. I think Elon said they will. I think he replied directly to me. I said that, and Elon replied saying, "You think?" Something like that. Innovation culture. Again, same thing with Starlink. Tesla has a culture of innovation. They're going to constantly work to make this better. They're going to constantly work to make this more cost effective. They're going to constantly work to make the customer service aspect better, the user experience better. Nobody else has the ability to do all that at scale. And so you're going to get to this point where like, does it make sense? Like if I'm sitting there, like once Tesla has the fleet going, and let's say they've got 100,000 vehicles going and they're expanding, and you're looking and you've got you don't even have your fleet going yet. And you're thinking, well, if we really invest $50 billion and we do these things, we can get to a fleet of 1 million vehicles by 2030. And who's going to pay for the rides when they've got, and by that time, Tesla's got 100 million vehicles or 50 million vehicles. How do you compete with that? I don't see how you get a return on investment then. If I'm sitting there deciding, do I want to invest in this other company that's going to develop robotaxis? I'm not putting my money there because they have basically zero chance of making a profit I'm not going to get return on my investment, right? And this plays to Tesla investors' advantage because if the others decide not to compete, then Tesla effectively has no competition, which they won't anyway. There's no meaningful competition anyway. But Tesla can't, I think people fear that Tesla will just keep their prices high. Tesla's not going to price high because they want to capture people from other things. They want to capture people who are riding in their own vehicles, who are driving their own vehicles. They want to capture people riding mass transit. So Tesla is going to continue to drive the price down so that they can expand the market. Because if you've got 10 million, if you've got 10 million vehicles and you're making $1 a mile, but you go to 100 million vehicles making 50 cents a mile, you're making 5 times as much money. How long before you expect Tesla to have a thousand vehicles in their fleet? Have they even reached 100? Oh, so let me just address that 14.4. It's a great question. My prediction is that by the end of 2026, Tesla will have about 10,000 vehicles in their fleet, and that could be off by a quarter or two, right? What I have been saying is I don't think Tesla stock is going to move this year. Maybe something's going to happen that I don't see, but I don't expect Tesla stock to meaningfully rise this year until I don't know what's coming that would move Tesla stock up other than Robotaxi reaching the scale where it shows up in the financials and you can see that it's producing revenue and gross profit, or has the potential to produce gross profit. And if you see 10,000 vehicles and they're generating $500 million in revenue, okay, that's probably enough to get a revenue line. And once it shows up in the financials, which I'm guessing is Q4, which doesn't appear until January 2027, we don't see those numbers until January 2027. So that's why I think we're not going to see much. But 1,000 vehicles, I'm guessing we see 1,000 vehicles by Q3. I just think it expands rapidly once they start growing. Do I agree with Chamath on SpaceX reverse merger with Tesla? I don't have an opinion on that. I didn't have a chance to listen to Chamath's argument. My gut hunch is no, they're just going to do an IPO. It's a nice theory. But it's a gut hunch. I don't really know. Okay, so same argument, like when you're a competitor and you're facing this, do you invest $50 billion? I'm making up the number 50 billion, maybe it's 20 billion, maybe it's 100 billion. Do you invest the money to become second place and have difficulty making a profit competing against this? I think you don't. I don't think it makes sense. Hi, B. Okay, so Nvidia is the toughest one. I've got Neuralink and Optimus coming. Nvidia is the toughest case to make for this because it's a little different. I don't think Nvidia's story is the same story, right? There are already people making chips that compete with Nvidia. Nvidia is the clear leader. They're the clear leader in volume. They're the clear leader in profit per chip. I think they're the clear leader in technology, but it's not the same advantage that Tesla has with, let's say, Robotaxi, or Tesla will have a Robotaxi. It's not the same advantage that Tesla already has with Starlink. It's not the same advantage that Neuralink is going to have. I mean, Neuralink, I guess, already has the advantage, but it's going to grow quickly. So the biggest one, and let me be clear, like I think I understand NVIDIA, but this is my weak point in this video. NVIDIA is not my strong. I am an investor in NVIDIA now. I think I'm 92% Tesla, 8% NVIDIA, or 96% Tesla and 4% NVIDIA. I forget the numbers. I did sell some Tesla stock to buy some NVIDIA stock. And I do generally believe in NVIDIA, and this is part of why. So CUDA is their software stack that goes along with their hardware, and it's a moat. Most of the people in the industry who are writing code for AI are writing code using CUDA, and nobody else has. It's like if somebody else comes along with a different approach, it's difficult for them to compete with that particular advantage. Then you go to technology lead, and this is a lot of details, but NVIDIA's chips are better. They're faster, they're more energy efficient, their cost per token, which is a popular term in AI, is lower. And then, so when you put all that together, they have this big lead, and then you have the ability to scale. NVIDIA is more ready, like when you're at 90% of the market and nobody else is more than, let's say, 5% of the market, and then the market grows 100%. Like NVIDIA is ready to grab as much market share as they can because they've got the ability to build more, to grow more. Right, they're ready for that. They have this partnership with TSMC they've had for something like 30 years. Jensen Huang has a personal relationship, and I think a lot of other people at NVIDIA have personal relationships with people at TSMC. They're working with Samsung as well. I have a theory coming in a future video that NVIDIA will partner, that Jensen and Elon are buddies, and that Elon wants to build a terafab at Tesla, that NVIDIA is going to partner with them, and that terafab will also make NVIDIA chips. So Jensen has access to more places to build his chips. That's a theory. That video is coming. And then vision innovation. This is the same thing, basically. Elon sees the future better than anyone else. Elon leads with innovation. Elon's teams lead with innovation better than anyone else. Nvidia is the same thing. Jensen Huang has been ahead of the game for about 30 years now, right? And his team gets it, and they innovate fast. And people talk about Intel. Intel's really struggling. Can AMD innovate? AMD has some good leadership. Can they catch up? Maybe. Like, who else? There's Tesla's going to build their AI 5 chips and AI 6 chips with Samsung, but that's the fab, right? And Google and Amazon, they have sort of their own hardware. They're still buying a ton of Nvidia hardware because Nvidia is just so good at it. Like the idea that the Google and Amazon and so far it doesn't seem like anybody else is making the chips at the scale that they're like going to sell them to other people, right? And you do have the Chinese developing hardware on the horizon. I think they're well behind Nvidia. I think Nvidia has too many advantages. And I think Nvidia is smart to start trying to locate some of its supply chain outside of Taiwan, which is a potential geopolitical risk. Okay, so I think that's the weakest case for a first mover advantage. But they were the first mover in GPUs. They're the first mover in AI chips. And I think that because they innovate faster, it's sort of like, all right, if you're going to invest a lot of money as a company to compete with Nvidia, I think there's a scenario where you still succeed. Because if the market grows as fast as I think it's going to grow, and you only grab 5% of that market, but the market 10x's, then you're doing great. It's worth it, right? So it's not quite the same story as the others, but I just wanted to throw Nvidia in there because they still have some first mover advantage, and I think it's valuable. All right, let's talk about Neuralink. Neuralink, for those who don't know, is a brain chip that another Elon company that puts chips in people's brains. Currently, they're helping paralyzed people to regain control of computers and eventually movement. They're working on soon implanting to help blind people see again. And they're expanding. So the technology stack is way ahead of everybody else. There's almost no one even doing anything. There's a couple companies that have a couple of ideas, but nobody's close to what Neuralink is doing in terms of technology, in terms of the threads. They insert these threads in the brain and they go in. The robot surgeon is crazy. The communication from the device to the outside world, the ability to manage heat, the ability that they're working on the next generation chip. They will insert the threads through the dura, which means the surgery is easier. There's less risk of infection. Building their own robot surgeon to do the surgery, just like we have LASIK robots to do laser eye surgery. I don't think anyone else has that or anything close to it, which means the surgery, once you get this down and working, then the surgery is less traumatic to the patient and it costs less. And it's more accurate and you're less likely to make mistakes. The team. Elon is just great at building teams. He sets an outlandish mission. Let's cure brain disease. Let's cure paralysis. Let's cure blindness. That's a mission anybody wants to sign on to, right? And then he leads by example by working his ass off, and he's bold, and he will spend what needs to be spent to get things done. He will move things out, make things happen. When you have a problem, Elon shows up and Elon says, "What's the problem with getting this done?" "Okay, let me fix it." And the team gets it, and the team knows how to work. So he just builds a great team. And the lead, right? Look at this lead. Like, ability to scale. They're developing the ability to build their own clinics. And the robot surgeon means you're not limited by how many neurosurgeons are available because the world has a shortage of neurosurgeons. Again, Elon has the vision innovation. But now, again, let's assume that Neuralink gets to the point where they have, let's say, 100,000 patients, right? We're at 12 or so now. Maybe next year we'll be at 1,000. Maybe the year after. And I think Elon wants to move this fast because there's an awful lot of people who need the help, right? This is a really big deal. There's how many paralyzed people are out there? How many blind people are out there that you can help? How many other brain diseases? It's just a monster thing. So Elon's not going to go slow. They're going to go fast. So let's call it 3-4 years from now, they're going to have 100,000 people with Neuralinks in them, right? And they're going to have established a safety record. They're going to establish, performance. They're going to keep iterating on better and better chips, being able to do more and more things, enabling people to do better. Now you come along in second place. How much do you have to invest, right? You have to invest tens of billions of dollars to build a competing chip. Are you going to build out a robot surgeon to do that part? Are you going to build out the clinics? All these steps that you have to make, you have to get through all these regulatory hurdles. And then by the time you get there, and you have a chip that's as good as let's say the next version of Neuralink's chip, right? Not the one that they're using currently, but let's say the next generation. But Tesla's 3 generations ahead. Now, someone's thinking about getting a chip implanted in their brain to cure their problem. Why would they choose your chip over the one that's 3 generations better and uses a robot surgeon to minimize trauma and goes through the Dura and all these other advantages? Why would anybody choose yours? I don't see how it makes sense to invest to be second place in this market. Like, why would you, unless it's just that there's so many people who want Neuralink, the equivalent of Neuralink implants, and you can't undercut them on price either, right? So maybe it's just like, well, the demand is so high that we'll sell some, but everyone's going to want a Neuralink, and it's way bigger than the gap between iPhone and Android, right? It's just a monster difference. I don't see once Neuralink gets this to scale, who's going to want the competitor? Do you really want the second best chip in your brain? I just don't get that. They should retrofit all those photomat booths into Neuralink kiosks. Interesting. Yeah, Neuralink is rarely seen in the news because the news doesn't want to make Elon look good. And there's no way of covering Neuralink that Elon doesn't look good, right? They can't have Elon be the guy curing brain disease, right? Elon has to be Hitler, right? He has to be a Nazi, monster. How do you make a Nazi monster guy who's helping paralyzed people regain control of their lives and helping blind people see again? It's like, this is why they don't cover it. It's just stunning. So that's the Neuralink story. And then Optimus is very similar to Robotaxi, right? What are Optimus's advantages? Well, there are other robots out there. We're seeing them, right? Chinese robots. The biggest differences are that Optimus has a better brain, right? It has AI 4 now. It's going to have AI 5 soon. And then not long after that, it's going to have AI 6. A better brain, enabling it to handle more. A better hand. I've watched a ton of these demo videos. None of them have a hand close to what even the previous generation Optimus has. They are so far behind on the hand. Elon and the team are like innovating, and they're going like no supply chain. They're just making their own stuff, totally vertically integrated. Their cost structure, again, Elon is always driving down costs, figuring out how you manufacture at scale. When you manufacture at scale, your costs go down. And then the data lead, right? They've got all the data from the cars that helps you build a world model in the first place. And then once they start building Optimus at scale, which is, I think this year they start building, thousands of them, and then they build tens of thousands, and then hundreds of thousands. You start generating that data and training your bots on real world experience, which is a level up from simulation. And now everybody's behind. The ability to scale. Tesla can manufacture at scale. They manufacture large, complex objects. The Chinese have the ability to scale. That is a key difference here. Yes, Tesla has the ability to scale, so do the Chinese. The Chinese don't have the brain, they don't have the hand, they don't have the data. They don't have the training infrastructure either, right? The training, both Robotaxi and Optimus have these, this massive Cortex training cluster. They're going to be building more. Tesla's going to build Terafab. Tesla's going to have access to a huge volume of chips once they build the fab to be able to supply every robot with the brain it needs. Huge advantage. And then again, vision and innovation is the same thing over and over again. Jensen and Elon have outstanding vision for where the future is going. They're ready to pivot when they need to pivot. This is just a monster advantage over everybody else. So that's the story. Let me turn to the chat here. Because the government only approved the other chip because they lobbied better. What government? What government is going to approve a shitty chip? Like, if you were a customer in a country, and let's say you're in France, right? And France says, well, we don't like Elon's Neuralink chip because they let you think about, somebody in a bikini. And we don't want to let people think about somebody in a bikini, right? So France says, screw you, you can't have Neuralink. If you're going to spend the money to get a brain chip and go through all that trauma, you'll just fly to a country that will install it for you. Who's going to take an inferior chip just because some idiot government says no? Mark says, I will need internet, $80 Starlink. Do I need it? It depends on what your usage needs are, Mark. I can't answer that question simply. So is Tesla not really unveiling a $25,000 model car for 2026? I don't think they're trying to boost car sales, Brooke. What will boost car sales is when FSD works and they tell you You can you can look at your phone while the car's driving you around. That, assuming they get to the point of unsupervised FSD, and you're able to buy a car and the car will drive you from point A to point B and you don't have to pay attention and you can fall asleep in the car, right? Or you can look at your phone and you don't have to worry, and when the car warns you, maybe you take over, but it's very, very rare. Um, the minute they tell you that, that drives car sales more than a $25,000 car. They do have the standard Model Y and I think the standard Model 3, which lowers prices a little. They just introduced standard Model Y here, standard Model 3 here in Thailand for 1.1 million baht, which is pretty competitive. Is Tesla using Optimus for real tasks at gigafactories? Are they improving skill sets? I don't think Optimus is doing anything productive yet. I think Tesla decided to hold off on using the previous generation Optimus. They're going to start building the next generation Optimus in, I don't know, a few months. Probably be a few months once they start building them, a few months of training to get them to the point where they're useful. And then I don't think that Optimus is that important in a factory. They already have big robots doing big things in the factory. There may be some use cases where they will use Optimus to do things in the factory, and maybe over time that'll expand. But in the short run, I don't think that's the primary use case. I really think something like partnering with PepsiCo, with Pepsi and Frito-Lay, like they did with Semi, to put Optimus in warehouses and do warehouse tasks. Like I could see Pepsi and Frito-Lay saying, hey, we want to do that, right? We did Semi, the Semi trial worked great. Let's try this. 14.4 says, I'm not so sold on the hand being key to success. There's still benefit to having job-specific hands for the task at hand. No, sorry. No. You want to have, the idea is to get to the point of basically artificial general intelligence in the physical world. And a really capable hand that can do everything is far more of an advantage than some task-specific hand. So I completely disagree with you there. China has many companies working on humanoid robots. It'll be interesting to see the robotics race play out. The problem with the Chinese is, like, is anybody going to build them to scale, and are any of them useful? Like, you can have a demo, and you can. I think one of the companies had a demo, and it was like it looked. People were saying it like it was real, and then if you looked really close, you could tell it was CGI because there was a guy walking around who was obviously a cartoon character, like. Hyundai has deployed Boston Dynamic robots in Georgia, but that is, of course, because they own Boston Dynamic. There's stories of companies like BMW deploying figure robots in factories and Boston Dynamics robots being in Hyundai factories. It's very, very small scale. They don't have the brains. They don't have the hands. They don't have the ability to do meaningful work. So that's just demo stuff. It's not real. Is it just a lack of unfettered capitalism and holding Chinese innovation back? No, Chinese innovation is great. I think what's holding the Chinese innovation back is, number one, that they don't have the access to the same chips. They don't have access to the same software. I think Chinese are very innovative, but there's a level where you need a certain level of engineering. Like China has great engineers, but Elon finds better ones. But I do think China is the threat. China is the competitive threat. If there's a competitive threat, it's China. I don't think they have the brain yet. They don't have the data that Tesla has from FSD. I think they're short in a couple ways, but don't bet against China innovating. I don't think they're going to catch up to Optimus. Will the first Semi get delivered this quarter? I don't think so. I don't remember if they started manufacturing yet. I think they're manufacturing soon and they'll be at scale by the end of the year, but I don't remember if they've started manufacturing. I haven't seen that they've started manufacturing. And first of all, semis have already been delivered. It's the next generation Semi that's coming soon, and I haven't heard the details of that yet. And I think we're going to hear, like, they got more efficiency, they got other performance benefits. So I think that's coming soon, but we don't know that yet. 14.4 says, I'm beginning to think the China problem is too many cooks in the kitchen, meaning the number of companies dilute the talent. Definitely that. And then, of course, they cook their books. Like, are they really making money? How much are they losing per whatever they make? Optimus would be great for deep ocean welding. I don't know if that's an important use case for Optimus. I think there's many use cases for Optimus. I'm not sure underwater is going to be the first use case for Optimus. Robot brain matters, hand matters too. They don't create the same level of chips. Why not? So Nvidia, TSMC, and Samsung have a lead in chip manufacturing, and China doesn't have access to the same tools for manufacturing. I think it's ASML as a company in the Netherlands. I think there are export controls from the United States and other countries that prevent China from getting access to the latest hardware. And the practical reality is China gets that and they're building their own. And China will, I don't know if they're going to catch up, but they're catching up. They're doing their best to catch up on that. When they do catch up on that, or if they get close, they also produce a lot of energy because they're building out solar faster than anybody else, and that's going to be a huge advantage. Let's see Optimus proven by clearing and scrapping landfills. I don't think that's a prime goal, prime use case for Optimus. I think I don't know what the prime use cases are. I think warehouses will be a primary use case early on. I think Elon is talking like they're going to be doing surgery in three years. I think Elon's over optimistic there, but the question is how quickly will they learn skilled tasks and be able to do meaningful skilled tasks? I think it's going to take longer. Don't bet against Elon, but the first use cases will probably be more simple things. Like a big thing for me is roofing. Like if you're going to install solar panels on a roof, wouldn't you rather have an Optimus up there than a human? The risk, the heat, there's all these reasons why I'd rather have an Optimus do that than a human. So, maybe you can replace half of roofing crews with Optimus, and maybe that drives this is one of my big things about Optimus. If you did solar roofing, whether it's solar panels or Tesla solar roof product or whatever, and your cost is, let's say, $30,000 for a typical roof, but you switch to using half your roofing crew as Optimus, and that lowers your costs by a few $1,000s. That difference is a huge difference in whether people decide whether or not to buy that roof. Because right now it's right on the edge of does it make sense to make this investment? But you make it $3,000 cheaper, all of a sudden it makes sense. And now you end up with 5 times as many roofing projects going, and you actually increase the number of jobs, even though half the jobs on each roof went to Optimus. Have I heard anything from Mark Plott? I have not heard anything from Mark Plott. Thank you for asking that question. If you hear anything from him, please let me know. Do I expect Tesla to forecast significantly reduced auto deliveries for 2026? No. I think that Tesla will expect to increase auto deliveries because unsupervised FSD will make the vehicles more attractive and they'll be able to build more. But I don't know for sure. And then if they're going to start putting, auto delivery starts to become an irrelevant topic if they start putting vehicles in the Robotaxi fleet. Like, what's more valuable? A car that's delivered to a customer or a car that goes into a Robotaxi fleet? The car in the Robotaxi fleet is generating like 5x the revenue and 3x the profit, if not more. In the short term, in the long term, even more. Use case: boring, tedious, and dangerous jobs, 100%. Boring, repetitive, and repetitive, boring, and dangerous, something like that. Elon had a phrase. They are incredibly this is the Chinese. They are incredibly ambitious and have many smart engineers. The Chinese space program will be interesting to see this race play out. I think the Chinese space program is the perfect example of why we shouldn't overestimate their ability to innovate, right? Because 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago now, SpaceX landed their first orbital rocket booster, Falcon 9, right? And they've done 500 reuses. And the Chinese haven't landed one yet. They haven't reused a single booster yet. So with all their innovative potential, with all their engineering talent, with all the money that China's government can throw at it, they haven't managed to reuse a rocket booster yet. So are they really better at engineering than the Americans? I'm not so sure. Elon is chronically over-optimistic. Nah. Optimi, not Optimuses. Are we sure? Has that been determined? I don't know. Need Robotaxi fast in Keokuk, Iowa. I don't think Robotaxi's coming to Keokuk, Iowa anytime soon. I don't even know whether the state of Iowa is going to be favorable to Robotaxis. You might want to move to another state. I think, Mark, you told me your bus is cheaper anyway. Mark, you're not going in a Robotaxi until the Robotaxi price is like 20 cents a mile, and that's a long ways away. Okay, so I think, let me just summarize here. I think that Tesla with Optimus and Robotaxi, SpaceX with Starlink, Nvidia with their AI hardware, and Neuralink with their brain chip have a massive fast mover advantage that it's going to be very difficult for someone to come along in second place and compete. And so you end up with, just like Apple has something like 20% market share, but 80% of the profits, and Nvidia has like 90% market share of AI chips. You might succeed on a small scale, but will you be in, let's say, AI chips? Somebody might succeed in a small scale, but are they going to really be able to compete with Nvidia at large scale? I don't think so. And then with Starlink, with Neuralink, with Robotaxi, and probably with Optimus as well. I think Optimus is the worst example of this for Elon's companies, but with Robotaxi and Starlink and Neuralink, the advantage is so monstrous. It's crazy. Boring Company too, really. Like nobody else is tunneling like the Boring Company. At a certain point, the Boring Company is just going to unleash, and you're going to see a lot more tunnels showing up in a lot of places, and no one else is really stepping up to do it. NASA and the U.S. are concerned about China's rising space prowess. Really? I haven't seen that. I don't think they are concerned about China's rising space prowess. China is so far behind SpaceX, it's not even funny. Samir says, "Do you think we need 10 billion FSD miles before we can remove the Tesla employee from the car?" I think Elon just said that, and I think we're close. I think we're going to get there within a few months. When can we expect Robotaxi doing trips between Tijuana and San Diego? Not for a while. Mary Barr is coming out with a pessimist robot. I might steal that. I might steal that, Hirsch. I might steal that. Okay, so that's the basic story. Boring tunnels in Vegas will soon have robovans. I don't think robovans are coming soon. I don't know why you think that. I don't think they're close to manufacturing robovan. Robovan is not until 2027 at the earliest, and probably 2028 at any scale. I think you're going to see boring tunnels in Vegas. I think you're going to see boring tunnels in maybe Nashville. I think you're going to see boring tunnels in a few other cities. Yeah, I mean, Elon says something soon, and what does soon mean? Did I see the GM reported 7 billion in EV tech losses? I did not see that, but it's not surprising. Okay, so I want to thank everybody so much for watching. I'm going to wrap this up quickly. Please, again, check out this book by Peter Thiel, 0 to 1. If you want to understand this idea of building a company that ends up having market power, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, there's a link in the YouTube description below, and I'll put a link in the X post when I post this. Thanks everybody so much for watching, and thank you to